Who's just put perfume on?
It is recording.
Me.
I should have guessed that, shouldn't I? Okay, so
I was sweating.
that's a great start, and now you're sweating onto the microphone. All right. So let's go through what we did yesterday. All right. So what we're doing was we were looking at the U.S. response to Soviet expansion into Eastern Europe, and we talked about how there was two problems. What were those two problems? Make yourself comfortable, Silas. There were two problems. Somebody tell me what those two problems were.
One was the fact that Europe was in a very bad economic condition.
One was the fact that Europe was in a very bad economic condition, particularly which two countries which had elections coming up? France and Italy. France and Italy also had, during World War II, the anti-Nazi opposition was led by the Communist parties in both France and in Italy. In fact, the Communists got rid of Mussolini. Who knows what happened to Mussolini?
He was the Italian dictator.
He was, but what happened? What did the Communists do to him? They executed him and his wife. They hung himself upside down in the square in Milan. All right.
Hang someone upside.
They did a lot. They desecrated his by his feet, and they did lots of crazy stuff with him. So that's problem numero uno. What's the second problem?
First economic.
Threat of communism spreading.
Yeah, that's going to cause the threat. That's going to be a catalyst to the idea of communism spreading. So we have elections in 1947 in France and Italy, where it looks like the communists could very well do well. And we know from our experience of Eastern Europe what happens when the communists get into any kind of power in government. They tend to take it over, yeah. So when they've been part of a coalition government in Bulgaria and Romania, they've then gone on to take over the government. So if they were to get a toehold in government, then it would mean the potential communist takeover. All right. Then there's something else that happens. What sort of state? What's the catalyst? Immediate catalyst in March of 47.
I don't know when it happened with the speech by Churchill.
That's 46. That's not a catalyst. That's the background. All right.
The threats to Greece and Turkey.
Yeah. What happens in Greece and Turkey? Side is talking. Go on, Sida. What's happening in Greece and Turkey? No, Sida. Go on. You started.
The communist government threatens to take over.
Yeah, not there yet. Not really. They don't have a communist government. They have a civil war between communists and the royalists. All right, and it's who supports the royalists that's in trouble.
According to the Presence Agreement, England, London,
Britain
was supposed to have 98% of Greece. But the thing is, Britain was economically very poor and they were trying to lose control of the world. They were trying to fall from their power, which means they had to give up some of their land. And if they gave up Greece, that would go straight to the communists because they had the other 10%, and that means more spread of communism. Okay,
yeah, right. But you've got the essence of it there. But let's put that into more historical language. Okay, so British commitments by 1947 are too big for Britain to be able to pay. All right, in 1947, they are at war they're managing Indian independence. They are at war in the Mandate of Palestine. All right, between the Israelis, the Jews who want their Israel, Palestinians who want to be independent. They're caught in the middle of that. They are trying to maintain an empire. After having bankrupted themselves during World War I and World War II. And the winter of 1947 is one of the worst winters in history. And so by March 1947, the British are bankrupt. And also at the same time, Britain is trying to do a massive welfare state program, free health service, free education. Basically, England runs out of money, and so it says, look, we can't afford Greece and Turkey anymore. And the British have been, particularly in Greece, they've been propping up the Greek government, the royalist government against the communists. They've been fighting a civil war there since 1944. Remember, I said that when the Germans occupied Greece, they'd never bombed Athens. The British bombed Athens in 1945 to get rid of 1944 to get rid of the communists. All right. So now this has an effect on it. This is a catalyst for the US. Now the US has been thinking about how to deal with communism, and it's been thinking about. It's had two big influences. One was somebody's speech. Churchill's speech.
And the long telegram.
That's the second one. So Churchill's speech was in Fulton, Missouri. What was the significance? Well, what key phrase comes out of that speech?
The Iron Curtain.
The Iron Curtain. And what's the significance of that speech? Who's he with?
Joseph Stalin.
Truman.
No. He's with Truman, right? Truman's literally sitting on his right hand side going, yeah, good idea, good idea. It's in Fulton, Missouri. Missouri is home state of Truman. All right, so this seems as though it's endorsed by the U.S. government. The Soviet Union believes it's like an aggressive act. But actually, in 1946, he's a bit premature. He says an Iron Curtain from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, behind which all the ancient cities, Berlin, Prague, have fallen under communism. He's premature. All right, what we're going to see today is actually, by 1949, it becomes a reality. In 1946, it's not really yet a reality. All right. The other one was
The Long Telegram.
the Long Telegram. And who wrote the Long Telegram?
What's the
Started
name
with
of
a
your
K.
name?
His surname started with a K.
Okay. That's the only name I remember.
Kenneth?
Kennan. First name?
John.
George. All right, George Kennan. All right, and who was George Kennan?
He was a U.S. diplomat who lived near the Baltic state, near the Baltic area, and so he basically sent the long telegram to Truman, like, this is what's happening right now.
Classic mayor. You've got the idea, but your bits of information a little bit out. All right. Prior to World War II, he was he's a U.S. diplomat in the Baltic states, particularly in Riga, which is the capital of Latvia. During World War II, he gets moved to the American embassy in Moscow. So he's right at the heart of Moscow during the war. All right. So he's very experienced in Soviet. They used to call it Kremlinology. What do you think Kremlinology means?
Study of the Kremlin?
Not like literally like, good building, I like the turret.
It's like the study of how things work in the Kremlin.
Correct, absolutely spot on, all right? So he was the first and preeminent Kremlinologist. That is somebody who studies what is going on inside the Soviet Union, because obviously it's closed off, they don't really know, so you have to kind of like an astrologer really, you have to try and like work things out and how things go. We'll see when we get to the 1980s, they have no idea. Right, they have no idea. All right, and they get things completely wrong. Nearly leads to World War III in November of 1983, because they get things so wrong. All right, but he's the big one. All right, big Kremlinologist. Okay, George Kennan, and he writes his long telegram, which later appears as an article under the pseudonym. What does pseudonym mean?
Fake name?
Fake name. Mr. Richard will be pleased. What's his fake name?
Mr. X.
Mr. X in Foreign Affairs magazine. Still going to this day. And what does he say? What's his whole point? Don't give me the solution. Give me the problem first. He diagnoses a problem, then he gives the solution. What's the problem he looks at?
That Russian traditional beliefs combined with communism is really dangerous.
It's up on the board, isn't it?
Yes, it's up on the board.
It's up on the board, isn't it? Yeah. All right. So you have your traditional great power rivalry. All right. Whenever two strong powers are there, they're gonna butt heads. All right. Whether that's England against France, England against Spain, whether that's Rome against Persia, whether that's India and China and over the Maldives or whatever, that's automatically going to happen, okay? Because they want to be powerful and they want to compete with each other. What makes it even more so, Russia has its traditional ideas that it wants. Russia has always wanted to expand into Southeast Europe. Russia has always wanted to expand into Turkey in particular, because you have the Straits by Istanbul, the Bosphorus Channel. That's the only way for Russia to be able to trade. Its northern ports are generally covered with ice for a large part of the year, so they look for what's called a warm water port. So that means getting access to the Mediterranean. Okay, now what Cannon says is this tradition, we add communism, and how communism is inherently expansionist. It wants to spread the communist revolution. This makes it a very, very dangerous foe, okay, and means that it's going to be very dangerous. So that's the problem. What does he say is the solution?
Containment, closing it off, and making sure that other countries don't fall to communism.
Absolutely. Containment, the policy of containment, and this is basically US foreign policy right up until the end of the Cold War, pretty much. We contain it. We don't push it back, because that's going to involve war, but we stand strong. The only language you understand is strength, and we basically surround it, all right, and we'll see how they surround it with alliances and everything else, all right. That's how we deal with it. We will defend anybody who is threatened by communism. The communists have control over this area. We will stop them from spreading, all right. That's the policy of containment. Okay, excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. So this is the summary that I've put up on here, because that's what happens. And then so Truman has two aspects to this, puts it into practice. All right, he puts it into practice. And how does he put it into practice? Two aspects he puts into practice. I'm going to ask for two other people.
There is the Truman's Doctrine.
Yeah, that's a political aspect that says we will stand up to anybody who is threatened by communism. Doesn't matter how nasty or horrible they are. Remember the phrase that I used. All right, remember the phrase that I used. Doesn't matter if he's our SOB. It doesn't matter if he's an SOB as long as he's our SOB. Is what the State Department say, literally say. And then what's the other aspect? The economic aspect.
The Marshall Aid.
Marshall Aid, yeah, the European Recovery Programme. All right, this gives economic assistance to Eastern Europe. All right, so this is where we get to in 1947. Containment's just going to be political and economic. Later, it's also going to become military and involving war fighting, and that's what we're going to see today, how this grows. Now, as I said last time, you know, the previous lesson we looked at Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe. Then we looked at policy of containment. Today we're going to look at Stalin's response. Right? That's how it's formed in the minds of an examiner who's building a curriculum to make it nice and easy, A to B to C. All of these things are mixed up. All right, all of these things are mixed up together. Yeah. Any doubts?
I'm kind of confused. Like, I get what the idea is, but what exactly is the Truman Doctrine?
The Truman Doctrine basically says we will support any government, any free peoples anywhere, any government let's go back to literally what it says. All right. We will give support for free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. All right. Subjugation means being taken over. Armed minorities, communists. Right. That's what they mean by that. Outside pressures, external countries, Russia. All right. So this commits them to give support to those countries. Now, question: what does that mean? You're going to give some money. You're going to go on, people. Good luck against those armed minorities. All right, boo, 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 communists. Right? Is it going to be that? Is it going to be fighting? Nobody knows. Nobody knows yet because we don't know. At the start, it's just financial. Okay, so at this point, we're just talking about economic, predominantly, maybe some political support. The question is, how far does it go? All right. How far do we go to contain? Does that answer your question? At the moment, I'm leaving it up in the air because that will develop as we go through. Yeah.
Yes, but what exactly is the difference between the Truman Doctrine and the policy of containment? Because they seem the same thing.
No, they are the same.
Okay.
The Truman Doctrine is the policy of containment put into action.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what. Okay.
No, it's the same thing. It's the same thing, but you want to. The Truman Doctrine outlines the policy of containment. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So let's look at how Stalin responds to this. Okay. How do you think Stalin's going to respond to it?
No accepting.
He's only gonna do something similar, like, oh, they have this, but we have something better.
Oh, bang on. Absolutely what he does, alright? He does something exactly similar, and then he does something very stupid. Alright? So his response come in two main areas. Alright? Three main areas. One is the establishment of what's called Cominform. Who's read 1984, George Orwell? Alright? These, you have like INGSOC. What's INGSOC?
I read this 3 years ago.
English socialism. All right, he uses terms like INSOC where you break down words to make other words. All right, newspeak, for example. Right, that's what Stalinists do. All right, so you have Cominform and Comecon. All right, I'll explain what those two things are later. Cominform is about political control. Comecon is about economic control. As Mayer says, these are the same things, really. All right, and then the third thing, as we'll see when he puts this into action, is with the Czechoslovakia coup of 1948, which we have touched upon. All right, but this is where the significance lies. All right, so let's look at the first one, Cominform. And remember, I didn't share it with you yesterday deliberately. I'll share it with you at the end of today. Okay, so Cominform. Prior to World War II, prior to the middle of World War II, because communism was supposed to be an international movement. Right? I know I talked about how Trotsky said it's going to be permanent revolution, and Stalin was about socialism in one country. But theoretically, eventually it would be an international organisation. It should spread around the world. And after the Bolshevik Revolution, in Russia, the Bolsheviks, communists, established what was called Comintern. All right? The Communist International. And this was an organisation based in Moscow or maybe even Leningrad. And its job was to export communism to every single part of the world. Okay? So if you were a member of the Indian Communist Party, you would go and you would get support from them. If you were... Sorry?
Yeah, it's very popular in Tamil Nadu and Kerala.
Mm-hmm. If you are Ho Chi Minh, who will come into things later on in Vietnam, you go and visit the Communist International. All right, their job is to spread revolution in various different countries, everywhere around the world. All right, and most communist organisations are controlled by Moscow. Okay, Spanish Civil War particularly. Now, obviously, during World War II, when the Soviet Union's allied to Britain and America kind of frown upon this, all right, and as part of their negotiations, when Stalin really needs help from Britain and America, he winds up the Communist International. Okay. So his first immediate response to the political Truman Doctrine and containment is right. I'm going to reset it up, but I'm going to call it the Communist Information Bureau, or actually the Information Bureau of Communist and Workers' Parties. Alright? This was to ensure that communist parties in every part of the world followed what Moscow wanted them to do. Give you an example of how controlled they were with the French Communist Party. Alright? Up until the 20th of July 1941, the French Communist Party was, boo, France must make peace with Hitler. Must make peace with Hitler. Hitler's really good. Must make peace with Hitler. On the 21st of June, they were like, boo, boo, must fight Hitler. Must fight Hitler. Hitler's very bad. This is where, in 1984, George Orwell gets the idea of we're at war with East Asia, now we're at war with Oceania, and we've always been at war with it and swapping it over, because the Communist Party did exactly that from the 20th. Actually, they did it twice. They did it in August of 1939. Boo, boo, Hitler's bad. Hitler's very, very bad. Then something happened. First, then they said, oh, Hitler's great, love Hitler, he's amazing, up until the 20th of July 1941, when they went suddenly, up until 21st, when they went, boo, boo, Hitler's bad. Why?
Because they had a brief
Who did?
Nazi-Soviet pact.
Yeah, the Soviet Union. All right, so it's basically Soviet foreign policy. Soviet foreign policy up until the Ribbentrop-Molotov pact was, let's fight Nazis. Then we signed the pact. Nazis are good, so we literally change. Right. Then what happens on the 21st of June 1941 to change it back to boo Hitler, boo Hitler?
Hitler
invades Russia the next day. Boo Hitler, and they change it like that, literally, as if it's never happened. And we've always been. And this is George Orwell's brilliance as a writer, because he brings that out in. We've always been at war. We were at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia. The next day we're at war with Oceania. We've always been at war with Oceania, because that's exactly what they did. Okay, so now we have. So that's what I mean about how it's controlled by Moscow. Okay, so now we have big controls of parties set up by Communist Information Bureau. That's number one. They're going to try and explore revolution. Number two, Comic-Con. Well,
Comic-Con.
That sounds like Comic-Con. Yeah, it does that. Yeah. All right, so this is the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, which is Comic-Con in Russian.
Even in English, Council of Mutual Econ, because economic.
Yeah, and this is basically their version of the Marshall Plan. So everybody in the Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europe, has to sign up to Comic-Con, and we will use our economies together. So we will basically share the economies between everybody. All right, and all trade will be done via using the ruble. All right, in the same way that the Americans use the dollar, Soviet currency was the ruble. All right, so what this meant was the Soviet Union now really its economy is intertwined with those of Eastern Europe, hugely so. They become dependent. Now at this stage, this is quite a good thing. Now they get lots of resources and stuff from the States in Eastern Europe. And they sort of spread this to other communist countries, Cuba, North Korea, etc. Right, later on. By the 1980s, this becomes a massive drain on their resources, because with the exception of East Germany, which is very well managed, relatively, countries like Romania, Bulgaria, North Korea, Cuba, Russians are just giving them lots of money that they don't have in subsidies. Okay, so that's the first two things that they do, and essentially this is carbon copy of this is the Marshall Plan and Truman Doctrine, basically. Okay, then comes big events. All right, as we've already talked about this before, but we just go over it. All right, this is the turning point of 1948, because there's no need for this. You always, okay, you're taking over. We can kind of see why you need to have Poland. We can't really do anything about it, but yeah, you did a lot in World War II. You were invaded by Poland, but this is just nonsense. So we've got President Benesh, coalition government with the communists. They want to, in part of this coalition, the moderates want to sign up the Marshall Plan. The communists organise strikes. They start clamping down on parties. The president, who's not a communist, try and holds things together. By February 48, all the other parties are kicked out, and the elections then take place in May, which are rigged to ensure the communists take power. And then the former foreign minister, the main anti-communist, and one of the his father was one of the leaders, Thomas Masaryk, who was one of the former people at the Treaty of Versailles who made Czechoslovakia, so a very important figure, fell from an open window. What do we call that? What's that word, phrase? Defenestration. All right, and so Czechoslovakia becomes a single party state. The significance of this. You've been trying to say, no, what the Americans are telling everybody about the communists being evil people trying to take over countries. It's not true. It's a democratic wish, right? You'll be trying to get away with that. You can publicize that, all right? And people might say, yeah, okay, they might have a point. We still like you for what you did during World War II. That's great. Oh, why have you just pushed that bloke out of a window? Right? It changes people's attitudes. People are like, well, actually, hang on a second. Even if you were not an anti-communist, you're like, I don't think these guys are really on the level. All right, I think there's something a bit shady about them. So particularly in Germany, particularly and elsewhere, there's going to be responses to that. So, how did Germany respond to the Marshall Plan? Right now, we have those three things. You've written it down now. So make sure you have those three things written down. And then we'll look at the big flashpoint next, which will come in Germany. So just quickly write it down. Comic-Con, Cominform, Czech coup. And interestingly, remember this is towards the end of Stalin's life. Stalin's going to die in 1952, right? So he hasn't got that long to live. Who's seen the film The Death of Stalin? It's a comedy film about the death of Stalin. It's very, very good. It's a bit rude, lots of swearing in it. But it's very, very good. And actually, historically, it's very, very accurate. Stalin dies. How do you think Stalin dies?
Defenestration?
No, he doesn't get pushed out the window. He might he falls off his chair in bed, lies in his own poo and wee for about 2 days. Well, for about a night. Why? Because he gets up late. Like, nobody wants to knock on his door and wake him up. Well, two things happen. All right, two things happen. Prior to his death, he's launched an anti-Jewish purge. All right, this is called the Doctor's Plot. All right, he said doctors are trying to poison him and other members, and all of the doctors in the Kremlin tend to be Jewish, and so this was a way of clamping down on Jews predominantly in the Soviet Union. So this means that doctors really don't want to treat. One, all the best doctors are dead or in concentration camps. Two, those that remain really don't want to treat Stalin, because if you get it wrong, all right. And then the other thing is, so he's there at night drinking his vodka or whatever, and then he just falls down and he's just like, he's on the floor, like dribbling and pooing and weeing all over himself. And the morning comes, the guards are outside. What do we do? We could wake him up. I don't want to wake him up. We wake up Stalin, and Stalin's cross with you. You're dead, right? So the people don't do anything. Then the other members of the Politburo come. All right, God, and we'll push in. We'll find out what's Joseph. He's poo whiffs like that, and then they're just like, all right, what do we do? What do we do? Get some doctors. Get a doctor in. No, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to treat him. No, get him. He's a proper doctor. He's a better doctor. Get him. Eventually they get there, by which time it's way too late. He's dead. So that's how it started. So there may be some little justice in the world that how mass murderer dies in a horrible way.
That is the funniest death I've heard of.
No, what's the Elvis Presley?
How did he die?
You know Elvis Presley?
Yes, the
You right?
singer.
Bruce Fisher, Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley liked two things. He liked rock and roll, right, and he liked cheeseburgers. All right, and he liked cheeseburgers a lot. In fact, he would just eat cheeseburgers. That's why you have this is Elvis Presley's Vegas phase, fat Elvis phase, right? Cheeseburgers, two effects: make you constipated, all right, all right, and they also put pressure on your heart, fill up with the heart. So Elvis Presley, oh, I need a poo, I can't go. Blue suede shoe, I need a poo, oh, I can't go. Do some more sing, oh, need a poo, heart attack. And ironically, when you die, one of the things that happens when you die is your sphincter opened, so he was able to poo. Slightly outrageous.
At least in the end, he got what he wanted.
At the end, he got what he wanted. But yeah, that's how Elvis died. There you go. Chapulis like, I came into school for this. That's how Elvis Presley died. So we've got those three things. All right, let's push on because I can send this to you. Flashpoint Germany. The next big thing, and this is going to be the big events. Oh, I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry, I got distracted by Stalin's death. Stalin's old, and he's starting to make mistakes. Stalin's a great diplomat. I think we can all say that. I mean, the way that he plays people in realpolitik terms. All right, he's excellent at that. Right, he's really at the top of his game, and he's a master strategist. He wouldn't have got where he was if he wasn't. This is when he starts making mistakes. All right, Czech coup. What happens here is a big miscalculation. All right, he starts miscalculating. So let's see what happens over Germany. So this is just a refresher. All right, so Potsdam, as we know, they made agreements on major issues. Short term, supposedly in the short term, Germany is going to be divided into 4 zones, with the country's permanent fate to be decided at a future peace conference. What year does that future peace conference happen? It won't be in there, man. 1990 or 1991.
But
Right, after the Cold War.
isn't that like a few years ago?
Yes.
What do you mean a few years ago?
I remember that day I was sipping tea.
You were sipping tea. I was in sixth form. I remember when the Berlin Wall came down, and I was in a German class. Not literally when the Berlin Wall. I was in grade 8, year 9. And I had German, and they had a German dude there like visiting, and he was like very, very happy. I remember that, and I was a communist, and I was just really homosexual. That was my German class, yeah, and that was a waste of time. Do you know what? Anything I learnt in my German whole year of German, right? So I was in top set. I got really when I started puberty, I lost all ability to do languages. I don't know what testosterone just affected me that way. I just lost. I was in a top set up until grade 9, and then I flunked. So top set, you did French and German. Bottom set, you did French and Spanish. All right, and I was in the top set, and so I did German, and it just destroyed me. I can only remember one thing, Lumpy, and I still remember it to say, right, Lumpy ist mein Hund.
Lumpy is your dog?
Yes, my dog is called Lumpy. But that was page 1 of the German textbook. It's the only thing I ever learned in German for an entire year of school. And I went on to do French and I flunked. I won't tell you what I did my GCSE in French. It was terrible. But anyway, I failed my oral, my French oral, because the only thing I could remember was sausages. Saucisson.
Speaking Latin.
So I'm speaking now.
Yeah.
That's nice. I've done something similar with like foreign, like wherever I am, I speak like a little bit of French and Spanish because that's what I know. Like I just automatically started doing that. But then for my oral, I could just remember saucisson, and so he was like, what's your favourite things? So I like to eat sausages. And what do you do after school? I eat sausages. What do you do at weekend? Well, mainly I eat sausages at weekends. And he was like, what do you want to do after you finish school? And he just started laughing. He was like, you want to eat sausages, don't you? It's like, yeah, thank you, Mr. Walker. That was my... these days you would get a second chance, but that was my French. I don't know. Anyway, so look, all of this happens. Berlin, 4 zones. Soviet Union's allowed to take reparations from Germany. Everybody takes reparations from Germany. So the Soviet Union takes everything. They destroy East Germany because they take all the factories and stuff. All right? This is going to make them really unpopular already. The Red Army's come in raping and pillaging and killing as it goes through, all right, which means they're unpopular already. Then they take away all of the factories and stuff, makes them even more unpopular. Poland moves westwards. And Germany would be denazifying, so they get rid of all the Nazis from positions of power. Demilitarized, so it wouldn't have an army again. Democratized, so they would the people's sort of government. And overall control of Germany would be what's called an Allied Control Council. All right, so Germany's future would be determined by a representative of England, America, Soviet Union, and France. All right, generally they were generals. Okay, because it was a military occupation at first. Later on, it would be civilians. And so nothing to affect Germany should happen unless those four people do stuff. Okay, that's the thing. And for Stalin, that's their idea, right? We can stop anything we don't like from happening because everybody on that Allied Control Council has to agree. Okay? However, now we're moving into 47, 48. The Allies start being pushed apart. Particularly Molotov. He's known as Mr. Niet. In Russia, I told you, he's known as Mr. Steel Bum, because he's got the ability to just sit while listening to Stalin for hours and not move. He's known as Mr. Niet. Niet is Russian for no. Whenever the Allies, British or the Americans, want something, it's like Niet, 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 Niet. It's a bit like I'm asking Mr. Richard for something. Mr. Niet. Alright, so let's have these two things. These are very important things to remember, because this is how each of these two sides will view the events that happen. Number one, the Soviets' biggest fear is a rebuilt and militarized Germany. Everything they look at is going to be based around that. The Americans' biggest fear is communism. Everything they look at is to overcome communism. Both sides are looking at it that way. Important to note, neither of this is ideological. Maybe the Americans' fear of communism is ideological. The Russians here aren't really talking in ideological terms here. We're talking in simple national sovereignty type terms. Okay? So if you were to do IB, you might get a question which is, how far was Georgia in the Cold War down to ideology? This is where you kind of like debate that. Well, actually, Soviet pressure in Germany, which was the flashpoint, wasn't so much ideological as it was defensive, or had a fear of Germany. American response was more ideological because it was for fear of communism. Similarities, both have fears. Both have fears. Alright? So here's the timelines over Germany. Alright, this is from the textbook that I don't think you have, so I'm just going to read through it, and I'm going to ask you to make some sort of like notes through it.
Can we dim the lights?
Yeah, that's a good idea, okay. So what I'm going to do is answer these questions that we have down here. Alright? Don't worry if you can't see the thing, I'm going to explain it, okay? So in January of 1947, alright, so we're going to go back to January 1947. The British and the Americans, they both want the same things for their economic zones. They want those zones of Germany to start recovering. And so what they do is they combine their economic zones, economically. Alright? So, this is called bizonia. Alright, this is called bizonia. France joins a year later to make trizonia. So what is bizonia? Bizonia is the unification of the British and the American zones. If you're Stalin, what do you think is going on now?
I don't think he'd like that.
Sorry?
I don't think he'd like that.
He won't like it. Why? What does it look like it's a progress towards?
It looks like USA, Britain and France are uniting Germany to fight against communism.
Yeah. So they're uniting Germany. It's a stage to having a German state. All right, they were already divided up into four. Now you make them two. Now you make them three. Well, what economic zone? That's going to powerful. We wanted a disunited Germany as part of our ideas. That's what we thought we were all about. We've also got this whole thing about the Control Commission. You've basically ignored that. We're being pushed out of Germany. All right. So from the Soviet perspective, they have equal say in what goes on in the Western zones, and now suddenly they have no say whatsoever. And this looks like the British and the Americans are trying to make Germany strong again, economically strong. And we're also talking about the areas of Western Germany, the Ruhr, the Rhineland, all right, that are in the British and the American zones. What's the significance of those areas?
I don't know. You go ahead.
Like, they made most of the monies and they were very agricultural.
They weren't agriculture, so what's the opposite of agriculture really?
Industrial.
They were like industrial, alright? If you're going to have, what does a modern industrial economy enable you to build?
More industries,
More industries, but also if you're thinking about in a conflict situation.
more war, weaponry.
More weaponry, alright? Interestingly, this is why, because your rural area is where you're going to have an iron, coal and steel, that's what you need to make weapons, okay? Interestingly, not now, but in 1952-53, France, West Germany as it will be, Belgium, Holland and Luxembourg signed the European Steel and Coal Community. This is the precursor of the European Union. That's designed to meld the French and German economies, industry, particularly obviously coal, iron and steel, to make them one. Why? So they don't fight each other. Because essentially World War One and World War Two, go back to 1870, you got a Franco-Prussian War. So 3 times in the last 70 years they've gone to war with each other. Well, we combine their economies together, particularly their war-making economies, they won't be able to fight anymore. Okay? So that's the European Coal and Steel Community. That's how the European Union begins. Alright, that's how the European Union begins. So, firstly we have Bisonia. Then we have Trisonia. Then they start talking about, well, what's the next step? You combine economically, the next step is political. So they're worried about a different creation. The Americans then also decide to make the Western zones get Marshall aid. Okay? So this was for countries, now you're giving it to Western Europe. So suddenly, not only have you created this new economic zone in your zones, your Western zones of Germany, now you're giving them money, where you're rebuilding all of the industry to make Germany strong again. We don't like this. Then the big catalyst happens, which is in June 1948, the Western powers bring in a new currency, Deutschmark. Alright? What's the significance of having a currency?
I mean, like, me.
Economically, it gives you more power.
It gives you more power, but there's a greater significance than that.
Like, they had one currency in Germany before that.
No, they had their own different things, but this is like a new currency across the zones.
It's economically uniting all 3 zones.
There's more than that.
I'm not sure about this, but you're trying to make the country more independent?
Yes. Who has currencies?
Countries.
So what are you making?
A country.
Exactly. Who does not want a country?
Russia.
Exactly. So you can't have a country without, well, how far can you have a country without a currency? It's a big question. Alright, it's one of the reasons why Britain today does not have the euro, because, and one reason for Brexit as well, but even without Brexit, Britain would never have had a euro, because Britain felt that you cannot be an independent country if you do not have your own currency. Right? It's one of the major steps that you have is, as an independent country, is your own currency. Well, if you have your currency without an independent country, what's the logical next step? An independent country, right? Because you need to have, to manage a currency, you need to have a central bank, you need to have Federal Reserve, you need to have some form of organisation, I don't know, let's call it a government, to oversee interest rates and all of that sort of stuff. You can't just have a currency, right? All of the instruments that go with a currency have to be there too, which is basically a government. So to Stalin and to the Russians, this is, well, you're building up Germany economically, suddenly you're going to make a country. This is no, we have to stop. We're going to stop this. Alright, so don't need to do that. What happens? what happens is the Berlin blockade. What Stalin decides to do is, that's a full thing. So what Stalin does is his reactions there is he blockades Berlin. Berlin, as we've seen, right, is right in the middle of the Soviet zone. Okay? He blockades it. The British and the Americans and the French have land corridors. They're allowed to, and train lines as well, that they can drive to the Western zone with their supplies. Okay? This is blocked. The Russians literally put a tank and go, no, you're not coming through. Clear breach of the treaties. Stalin's idea is we are going to stop the currency, or you can have your currency, but I'm going to have Berlin. So, how are the British and the Americans going to react? This is containment's first big test. Notice we had containment with Czechoslovakia. Is yours already? You're being cheeky with Czechoslovakia, but we're not going to push you back. That's your area. Alright? Containment's about our area, keeping it the same. Now this is a direct threat to West Berlin, which is US Western sphere of influence. Containment has to happen now. So what do you do? You're the West. What do you do? You're the Americans. What do you do?
I'm not sure, but since the land is blocked, just fly stuff in?
Yeah, you can fly stuff in. Alright? It's very, very difficult to do, but you can fly stuff in. Alright? You could also try and punch a hole through. That involves going to war. Right? Because you're going to fire on Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers are going to fire back. We've got World War III. Alright, let's not do that. Let's put that moment and all of these different strategies, all of these different bits of diplomacy are all about one thing: getting the other person to shoot first. Right? You want the other person to shoot first because then they're the bad guys. Right? Nobody wants. If you are the person that shoots first, everybody hates you, thinks you're bad. That's why on the 1st of September 1939, when Germany invades Poland, they get a whole load of Jewish concentration camp inmates, dress them up in Polish uniforms, give them machine guns, shoot them, and put them in a radar station inside Germany and say, oh look, we've been attacked by Poland. And that's what Goebbels says. So that's what they believe. We're invading Poland because we've been attacked. Okay, so whoever shoots first is the bad guys. So we fly our planes into West Berlin. We therefore dare the Russians to shoot us down, because they would be the ones firing first. Stalin's like, ugh. So what can Stalin do? Can he shoot them down? Then the onus is on him to start World War III. But there's another really important act of symbolism here. The British and the Americans have lots of planes that can reach Berlin. They're not transport planes though. What sort of planes are they? Warplane, bomber planes. So look at this. Look at this and imagine the imagery. 3 years ago, 1945, people like my grandfather, who was a navigator in the RAF, flew Lancaster bombers over Germany. All right. Just 3 years prior, they were flying over Germany, blowing the hell out of it. Flying over Berlin, dropping bombs. Now, what are they dropping? Food, children's toys, chocolate. All right, supplies. What a difference! What a symbolism! Suddenly, these planes that were attacking German cities are now providing food, medicines to those same German people. So, if you're German, suddenly, who are you going to think are great?
The American.
You're going to think the Americans and the British are great. Okay? So you're going to get much more closer to the Western Alliance. You're going to think, yeah, okay. So this is exactly what they did. And we had something, again, a cartoon there saying, you know, that Stalin dares not shoot down the birds flying in there. All right? And it's something crazy like every 7 minutes a plane lands in Berlin. to keep it going. Stalin's miscalculation is that they wouldn't be able to do this, all right, but they are, all right. So there you go. The peak is by September. One plane lands in Berlin every 2 to 3 minutes. Now imagine the logistics behind that and the organisation behind that. All right, that shows this is first time containment in action, and it works. All right, Stalin can't shoot these planes down, otherwise he's the baddie. So he has to back down. In May '49, he backs down. Or over a year later, he backs down. Or nearly a year later, he backs down. This makes Stalin look an absolute tool. You've brought the world to the brink of war for no reason. What are you doing? Massive problem for Stalin. His response is, dudes, we need atomic bomb. Because the other side of that is one reason why he can't risk a war in 1948 is the Americans have an atomic monopoly. So if there's a war, we lose. So we have to do that. What is the consequences? The consequences are huge. The consequences are that Churchill's Iron Curtain becomes a reality. Because it's you marry this to the Czech coup, right? This is proof the Soviet Union is trying to take over Europe. Look, first chance they get, they push somebody out of the window, they take over Czechoslovakia. Second chance they get, they try and take over West Berlin. Right, they're trying to take over. So, countries in Western Europe, in April of 1949, formed NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which where they pledge under Article 5, I think it is, mutual defense. What does mutual defense mean?
If you are attacked, we'll help you. If we are attacked, you help us.
Yes, exactly. If one country in NATO is attacked, it's seen as an attack on everybody. And therefore everybody is committed to go in and fight. Okay, so you attack Germany, it means that you also attack America, Canada, England, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Turkey. Good luck with that. Right? When was the only time that article was invoked? Once. Any idea when? When one NATO country said it had been attacked in an act of war and asked for assistance from all other NATO countries.
I don't know about if it's happened, but
It happened.
nearly.
It happened once. It happened once this century.
Well, of course, this century.
No, this century.
No, I was about to say Ukraine, but then
No,
that
no.
didn't sound
No,
right.
no.
Because they haven't joined NATO
No.
yet.
Happened in this century.
One of the
Palestine.
No. It would be one of the countries was attacked.
Ukraine. Russia.
No. One of the NATO countries was attacked. The United States was attacked.
Yeah.
Wait, I should start reading the news.
You know the event, you just haven't clicked it together.
9/11?
9/11, exactly. All right, so America was attacked on 9/11 by Al Qaeda based in Afghanistan with the support of the Taliban government. All right, so the Americans called Article 5 and said, "You help us invade Afghanistan." All right, that's the only time it's been invoked. All right. In response, later on in 1955, we then have the creation of West Germany. West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, joins NATO. This then means that the Soviets then follow by establishing what's called the Warsaw Pact. So what we have now is, don't need to see that, don't need to see that, don't need to see that. Oh, actually, that's quite interesting. This is a cartoon. This is an old bomber. Sonny, them last two I got for the airlift back in 1948. This is Air Force decorations for bombing Germany, and then at the end it's coal and flour, because that's what he gave. This shows you the importance of it. All right. So what do we have as a consequences? We have the Iron Curtain. Alright, the Iron Curtain is a thing. We now have the political and military division of Germany and Europe. We have two independent German states, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, and the German Democratic Republic. Any country that's got democratic in its name, you know, is not democratic. Any country that has peoples in its name, you know, doesn't look after its people. German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. And we have the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949. So everything that there we go, that's all the different things, permanently divided. The Iron Curtain's now a reality. Alright, everything that Churchill said in 1946, he was premature by 1949, he's absolutely correct. This is containment in action. What happens though, and there's no cooperation anymore between the United States and the Soviet Union. There was before, prior to this, there's none. Oddly, what now happens? Absolutely nothing. Because this is where the Cold War comes from. Because it's frozen. That border is frozen. There will be things like in 1963, lots of people in Berlin will try and run across to West Berlin, so they have to build a wall in Berlin. At this stage, Berlin is kind of south. But the borders, as we've seen between the two countries, between the Warsaw Pact and NATO, they become a fortified border. As you know, I used to teach in Prague. I used to drive into Germany, but I also used to drive to the UK and stuff from Czech Republic into Germany. Go through the Sudeten lands, as I told you, it's German. All right, and then you get to the border, you can still see the remains of the Cold War border, concrete pillboxes, concrete stuff all around and stuff like this. All right, this was a heavily fortified border, but it was frozen. It was frozen in time until 1989. All right, we will go back to Berlin in 1962, 61, but other than that, nothing happens in Europe until the 1980s. All right. What does happen next for containment is. So actually, this is the beginning of the Cold War, I would say. By now, the Cold War started. But what then happens is it moves to Asia, particularly to Korea. So, these are the events. Alright, you should have all of the events. This is pretty much guaranteed question for paper 1 about the origins of the Cold War. Is what we need to do now is marshal those events. See what I did there? Marshal these events in order to answer this question, which is who is responsible for the Cold War, who's most responsible for the Cold War, the USSR or the USA. I think we'll probably... What time is it now?
We have 15 more minutes.
You have 15 more minutes, I think. Alright, I just want you to make sure you've got those key events. Yeah, Maya.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Firstly, so can you post these presentations on Launchpad?
Yeah, sure.
And also you said that you'd send a podcast.
Yes, I said that, I know. I was waiting to do the same things today. I wanted to get through this first before I post it on Management, but I will do. Alright? So, we're going to look at two different things. Stalin's to blame and the Americans to blame. We're going to marshal that later on. We'll do that next time. What I want to do is start from the back and then start from forward, then work back. All right. We'll look at how Stalin can be blamed next time. Then look at the Americans. But I want to talk about this historiography. All right. What do you do? Because it's a nice way to finish. So I'll pass it on. Make sure you've got all of the events. All right. What is history? What are you studying now?
Events of the past.
Events of the past.
Very vague way of putting it.
No, alright, you're studying the events of the past. Recorded history basically means anything that's been written down. Alright, so prehistory is before written records. Alright, whose view of history what history are you doing?
The whole 1900s history.
No, you're not. Who wrote your textbook?
British-based college.
No,
university.
no, it doesn't matter what his name is. What's his name or her name? Who wrote your textbook?
Ben Walsh.
Ben Walsh. You're not studying history. You're studying what Ben Walsh thinks about history, and you're studying what Mr. Robert thinks about history. All right. So, when we talk about history, it's very important to think about something which is called historiography. It's my most interesting history course at university. All right, which is the study of writings about history. Okay, because a little bit of future TOK coming in here, field of knowledge coming in here. All right, history is a product of its time. Okay, the writings of history are the products of its time. Whatever people think are important at the time, when they're writing about history in their contemporary times, that reflects on what they believe to be important. All right, that's going to be based around their politics to a large extent. That's going to be based around their experiences. We learn as much about the history of the past from reading about the past, but also reading about the history that was written during that past. Is one of the reasons I don't like teaching anything other than 19th century history, because I don't think we know anything really about 20th century history. Because everything that we know is heavily based around interpretations of people who were there, who are emotionally involved in what happened. Okay? Classic is World War One. All right, World War One. Who won? One of the big things about World War One was that generals were terrible and the Americans won it at the end. Neither of those two things is true. Classic one is about Vietnam War. Who won the Vietnam War?
Vietnam. I mean, not Vietnam.
Who won the Vietnam War?
The USSR.
Technically Vietnam, but they lost way too many people.
No, basically what I'm trying to say is, when you've done the Vietnam War and stuff like that, how did they lose? Why did the Americans lose in Vietnam?
Because they didn't understand.
Go on.
They didn't understand how to change their way of fighting depending on their environment and their
Okay, name me one battle the Americans lost in Vietnam. If that's
they were
true,
all ambushes.
no. If that's true, all right, name me one battle the American military lost in Vietnam War. Name one.
That's fine.
Yeah, there isn't one. You fight the Americans, or you fight the American army as an army, you're going to lose. There's nobody more powerful than the American army. All right, they will blow the hell out of it and 10 times over. All right, in a military one-on-one context, they will defeat you, and they defeated the Vietnamese. All right. They didn't lose the Vietnam War because of military stuff. They lost it because of the loss of support at home, because of politics. Every time they fought the Viet Cong, they won. In 1975, it's not the Viet Cong that takes Saigon when the Americans run away and leave. It's North Vietnamese army. It's tanks. It's not guys in pyjamas running around villages creating ambushes and using cheeky little techniques. It's none of that. It's an army. It's a proper invasion. So our view of history is modern history is tainted by the fact that people are too close to it until personally involved in it. And if you're personally involved with something, you don't like to admit that you're wrong. We go to the 19th century, nobody cares. Nobody's personally invested in whether Napoleon III was a lunatic or a genius. Nobody cares anymore. So you can be much more dispassionate about it. When we write about the Cold War, this is the point I'm trying to get at here. Writing about the Cold War and who is at fault for the Cold War, and a question we can make is, can we make value judgments about the past, as in blaming people? This is a bad person. Let's pull down his or her statue because they did bad things that were okay 200 years ago. Can we make moral judgments upon the past? Personally, I think we can't. We've got no right to. And if we do, that allows people in the future to make moral judgments about us. They might think we're a bunch of absolute muppets. All right? The past is a foreign country, somebody once said. They do things differently there, and we should respect that. So making moral judgments is pointless. If you want to be moral about something, be moral about what's going on in today. No point being moral about people that have been dead for 500 years. Get a life. But what we do is, what the world is going through and the events are going through at a particular time will inform how people view the past, particularly the immediate past. And we find that in our historiography of the Cold War. Okay? Where we answer the question, who's most to blame? So we start off with the orthodox viewpoint. Orthodox, what does orthodox mean?
Like the normal kind of
Traditional?
Yeah, traditional, normal, the first thing that starts off. This is your orthodox Christianity, it's kind of like the oldest Christianity, that type of stuff. So the orthodox view, basically it's everything is the fall of Stalin and the Soviet Union. Okay? This is from the 1950s, beginnings of the Cold War. Everybody's there at the moment. The Russians have just invaded Czechoslovakia. They've just done the Berlin blockade. Korean War's going on. Man, Russia, you've done this. So, as a writing about history, you come from the society in which you are writing. That society is anti-Americanism. Okay, sorry, anti-Russian, anti-communist. Therefore, historical writing of the 1950s reflects that society. We then move into the 1960s, and we see a change, particularly within universities, and obviously most history is written on universities because it's why people go to university, and your professors start doing that. And we get a revisionist viewpoint. What does revisionist mean?
a revised change.
Yeah, you want to change something. All right. So the revisionist viewpoint in the 1960s, at the height of the Vietnam War, where you've got Kent State University in 1972, you get students protesting against the Vietnam War. They get shot by the army. Right, 12 people get shot by the U.S. National Guard at Kent State University massacre. So it's like everything we're doing is wrong. Anti-Vietnam War. We're just trying to take over these places in Southeast Asia. They don't want us. You know, we're wrong to be in Vietnam. Therefore, we're wrong in the whole Cold War. All right. So we have the revisionist historical period, which says that it's all the fault of the Americans. The Americans did it all. Okay, that's the 1960s. Then we get to the 1970s and early parts of the 1980s. We go through a period of Cold War relations called détente. Anybody know what détente means? Relaxation, yeah. Relaxation, friendship, that type of stuff. So we have the policies of détente. We had the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1963. Everybody's like, oh no, this is really, maybe having lots of nuclear weapons and not talking to each other, particularly not talking to each other, maybe that's a really bad idea because we can start a nuclear war. So let's relax tensions, let's start to have arms negotiations. So late 1960s, 1970s, we have what's called détente. And lo and behold, in this background of peace and love between East and West, we get what's called the post-revisionist viewpoint. Post meaning after, Latin for after. So PM, you have AM, post meridian. Meridian is like noon, right? So post after.
There's a line.
The meridian line goes through Greenwich, 0 degrees. Greenwich in London. There's also one in when we beat the French. It was before it was in French, called the Rose Line that goes through Paris. You can see it by the Louvre. You know the Louvre Museum has the
Point, and it's exactly in the rose line. Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen Da Vinci Code as well.
Yeah.
Yes. Good. It's good. So I forgot what it was. So this is the post-revisionist viewpoint, which actually is both sides. All right, both sides are equally to blame, misunderstandings, and all of this. All right. Now, post 1990-2000, we have the post revisionist viewpoint, and particularly this guy here called John Lewis Gaddis, who is kind of like the doyen of Cold War writing. Fantastic author. Basically I steal all of this from his book, frankly, his books, and his viewpoint is, well, basically it's mutual misunderstanding. No side really knows each other, and they look through and they don't really understand where the other side is coming from. So this mutual misunderstanding, but he says it's made much worse by Stalin. That because Stalin is a paranoid narcissist who wants to maintain power, and because he is, he's now been in power in the Soviet Union since the early 1930s, so 15 plus years in power, the whole Soviet Union resembles Stalin's personality. All right, if you have that much control, one person has that much control over a country, over a government, over any organization, all right, that organization will reflect that person. You see that in any see that in a classroom. And your classes that you have respect the personality of your teachers, right? Double that up to an organisation, to a principal of a school, it reflects them, all right? I like to think I've been here 3 years. If you were here more than 3 years ago, it's a slightly different school now and a nicer school than it was 3 years ago, all right? Because it reflects the personality of the person in charge. Same with countries, particularly with Stalin. So he says particularly Stalin's fault. Why do you think this comes about after the 1990s, after 1991, in the 1990s? Why do you think?
The USSR collapsed in 1991.
It did so.
Oh wait, information is no longer kept under lock and key.
Yeah, you can actually go and read though. Remember, for up until 1989, up until 1991, even later than that, nobody knew what the Russians thought. You're writing a history of the Cold War based just on one side, or you're writing a Cold War as you're directed to by the Russians or the East Germans. All right, and if you don't write it in the right way, you disappear. Okay, disappear.
I like the laughter. I see.
Yeah, evil laughter coming from outside. Right, so you've only got really one half of the story. You've only really got one half of the story. It's only in 1990s when historians, Gallus being one of them, Robert Conquest being one, others as well, get access to the Soviet archives. They're actually able to go through and see what's going on, to actually see that when we talk about the Red Scare in America, lots of communists everywhere, and you're ever been a member of Communist Party? Actually, you know what? There were loads of communists there. All right, McCarthy was a bit of a tool, but he was absolutely right. Right, it was riven with communists. Okay, loads of spying was going on there. It also revealed things that we didn't know. We'll talk about 1983. I read a fantastic book during the vacation on 1983 and how close the war came to 1980. Closest we've ever come to destruction was in November of 1983. Russian planes literally on the tarmac with nuclear bombs, ready to go. Okay, they didn't understand. We didn't understand what was going on. So since then, it gives us a much better understanding of the documents, particularly pertaining to Stalin, because Stalin liked to read stuff and he used to make notes in the margins of things and highlight stuff and underline things and do like big question marks and stuff like that. So you actually got that almost like having a conversation with them. So this is what I want you to try and think about when you have this. When you do IB history, you do far more of this. So this is your IB high level history basically. This is what differentiates standard level from high level. All right, this is the historiography, way beyond your IGCSE, but I still want to bring it in here because I think it's interesting. History is a product of the society in which the historian is writing. All right, in the same way that you are a product of your society, your thoughts, your beliefs, your ideas and your values will come across in your writing as a historian. Now, the ideal historian is somebody who removes all of that and acts dispassionately, but they will still be a product of their country and they will still be a product of their beliefs and of their contemporary times, and we can see that through historiography. It's actually really interesting to write about the writing of history, right? Because it reflects it all. Okay, on that bombshell, any questions? No? One more thing. When we come to look at both sides, we'll have a vote on which one of these you believe. Okay?
I don't know how relevant this question is, but
We're doing history, everything's relevant.
yay. Is any of the archive information available to the general public to read, or is that not
The
available?
Russian archive.
Google Translate.
No, yeah. The Russian archives, I've got no way. Don't primary sources and that. I suspect since Putin, less so. Everything from the US and the UK, yes, up to 30 years. In the sense, the UK has what's called the 30 years rule, so it keeps things secret for 30 years 50 years for really stuff, 100 years for stuff about the royal family, right? So every 30 years, so every Christmas time, New Year, you get released documents. So we had from 30 years ago, 2024, that's going to be, what's that, 1996. Or everything the government did in 1996 came out on the 1st of January. You can go to Kew Gardens in London, you can go as a historian, anybody can go off the street and be able to look it up. United States, far more information, pretty much any information you can ask for under the Freedom of Information Act, that's all available from Congress. Most of it will be online. Most of these, if you want to go further back, lots. I warn you, this is an internet Google or a rabbit hole you can go down. You can actually go through and look at their documents. So particularly if you're looking at if you want to look at the origins of World War II, you can look at the actual German Foreign Ministry, French Foreign Ministry, German Foreign Ministry, British Foreign Ministry, American Foreign Ministry, Russian Foreign Ministry. All of those records are all online. One of them's called the Yellow Book, one's called the Blue Book. I've spent evenings just going through that. I learned from that, going through that the Nazi-Soviet pacts first started in Romania or Bulgaria with a contact from the Russian embassy bumping into a German contact in a cafe or something like that. So it's really interesting reading it firsthand. Yes, it's a rabbit hole to go down, but they are generally available. Particularly US documents, all of US documents more than anybody else is available. Up until very recent, even very recent stuff. Any questions? We have ECA time tomorrow. Alright, I want us to bring this all together. I will share this PowerPoint online with you now. And then we'll go through both sides, Stalin's role, Truman's role, and then we'll finish up with how far was Stalin's brain for the Cold War.
But the bus will have any thoughts.
No, that's fine. I'm just read through what's on here. Just have a look at what's on here, and then we move on to Korea. Then we move on to Korea because that's going to be. This is your paper 1. You have question 5, question 6, question 5 January 1920s, question 6 January 1930s, question 7. Mostly origins of the Cold War. So this is kind of like your third question. Okay. We'll then move on to containment. We've looked at containment in Berlin, but they will talk about Korea, and then containment under Eisenhower, and then Cuban Missile Crisis, and then Vietnam, and that's containment. Okay. Any other questions? No? Have a wonderful day.
Don't forget to take 1 hour 17 minutes.
1 hour 17 minutes. It must be a record, Mr. Robert Twelve.
This is going to be a pain to upload on Discord. I just
Yes, it does.